thing to go ahead and take a liberal arts education, because it opens up your world not only to expose you to different things that you may have as a major, but also just to think about the world with like a critical lens, and that may open up to you whole new career options or ideas that you never would have even thought about if you just went and maybe got a particular like engineering or specific degree right away.
The real value for a liberal arts education for me was that it taught me how to be a flexible thinker, so able to adapt to different situations and different working conditions. And if I take a look at the different kind of work that I've done, both sort of in the more in the private sector as well as in nonprofits, and then now again back in the private sector, it's allowed me to be able to quickly change gears and adapt to new environments, and do so in a way that that is a little bit more nimble than if I had learned something very specific and been trained to do one very sort of linear kind of thing. So I think what it helps me do is see from a broader perspective different ways of working and finding ways through. And I think on the whole that's been a real benefit.
Pick a school that you can travel with, both in terms of international travel, and also pick a school that lets you do different things like carpentry or I don't know, science classes that you wouldn't get at maybe just any liberal arts college. Pick a school that lets you experiment, because that's the best way to learn what you're good at and what you want to do. I think liberal arts is good at letting you experiment with your mind, but also pick something that lets you experiment with your hands or with others.
My first job was with a think tank in Washington, D.C. called the American Enterprise Institute, and I worked as a research assistant. And I believe I was hired principally because during my undergraduate degree I'd had the opportunity to travel to Rwanda, where I worked with the microfinance institution for about 7 months. And based upon that experience, I was able to connect with a scholar at the think tank who was studying economic development issues in developing countries, particularly Africa, and my experiences in Rwanda had paired nicely with what he was working on. Also, I had studied international relations at the liberal arts institution where I studied, and that was also a good fit for the think tank writ large. So my liberal arts education very much prepared me to enter the Washington think tank research world, and was ultimately a pretty good fit for what I've ended up working on well into the future.
So my first job was pretty technical in nature, working on supply chain, which is pretty which requires some sort of technical depth, which I didn't have at the beginning. So it required me to be able to learn, to get up to speed very quickly, and to learn on the job, and be able to think on my toes some, think on my feet some. And so that I think I think the inherent challenge of the liberal arts education. But the way that you're taught to think, and the way that, and the confidence that you have to be able to try new things, I think is what carries you through the sort of technical knowledge that you have to ultimately gain. It would be a mistake to say that you don't need the technical knowledge, because it is required, but the way in which you acquire it will just have to be different if you haven't received it previously.
For me, I focused, all of my career has now been in business, and I didn't take any business classes at all, although I really could have because my school offered them, and I didn't know how to do like basic accounting, things like this that I think are good life skills. So I would say take more business classes, but try to take the ones that are actually useful. That's sort of difficult advice to follow.
I think some of the more mundane tasks, to be completely honest, some of the organizational tasks and logistical tasks were ones that I found particularly difficult. As a liberal arts student, I really didn't learn how to use Excel, for example. I didn't know how to use computer programs. I didn't know how necessarily to organize a schedule, or to organize an event, or to set up a meeting, or to take a meeting. And so some of those sort of basic organizational skills I lacked when I went into my first job. However, I think my liberal arts education gave me a worldview that allowed me to gain those skills quickly once I entered my first job.
My job right now as a lawyer, I end up doing a lot of work with financial statements, and I'm terrible at math and didn't take a finance class at all, and so that kind of thing would be that'd be really helpful. So just, I don't know, like if you decide that you're going to stick with one route, like political science. Don't just read, history and politics textbooks. Go take like an econ class or a math class or a stats class or something to broaden your skill set. That'll help you out a lot in your first job.
I think definitely the financial aspect of going to a liberal arts college should be considered. I had to borrow some money to go to college, but I know that some of my peers have borrowed astronomical amounts of money, and for them the liberal arts education, the payoff versus what it actually cost, that's an equation that I think they probably should have looked at a little bit more closely, and ultimately we need to encourage young people to think about that more. Some of the amounts of debt that people are taking on are just huge, and even with the education and the additional income that one can earn with having a liberal arts education, whether the degree is going to pay for itself or not is still a pretty big question. Or whether, even if it will pay for itself, the fact that the debt will be borne when you're still young, in your 20s and 30s, during some of those really golden years, I think is particularly burdensome. And so we have to think long and hard about the types of debt that we're willing to take on. And that's something that I would advise young people to consider. There are a whole array of universities and colleges at our disposal, some of which are liberal arts colleges, some that are more specialized programs, some that are private, some that are public, and at the end of the day, you can have a positive experience in any one of those types of institutions, and I would encourage people who are interested in the liberal arts college to try to find a good deal, and ultimately I think those good deals are out there. You just got to look long and hard. You maybe have to apply for some scholarships, maybe have to be willing to do some teaching assistantships, things of that sort, but the opportunities are out there.
Opt for the liberal arts education, but I would say that there are ways to make it affordable. The sticker price is not actually the real price. You can get scholarships, you can get grants, you can have other people help you. For example, I thought about this when I went to, I felt like I needed a master's degree, and so I got my business school essentially paid for, because I thought the education is really worthwhile. I can't advance without it, but it's still not worth the sticker price. So I would just say that look for ways to get around the sticker price.
Even then, even if you can't get around the sticker price, I think it's the payoff that you have from an education that has a foundation in the liberal arts, even if you have to delay the actual start of your technical career by 4 years in order to do that. It has benefits that pay off greater over the course of a lifetime, and sets a foundation for you to not only take what you learn technically maybe in a job or in grad school, but to expand beyond it and think about what are the horizons, how do I push the envelope of what I'm doing. And also, liberal arts education teaches you to keep your imagination.